That's right. Thank you, Beth and Sue. It was wonderful to hear that. And Dennis, really powerful song. I remember I was taking guitar lessons, and my teacher, we were looking at that song, and my teacher is sort of older. She was an idol of mine. She still is an amazing woman. And she just got kind of like, she started musing. We're in her studio, and she was like, oh man, when I first heard that song, I had some crazy ideas. And I just had this moment of like imagining this amazing woman in her college years, hearing these songs and experiencing that song for the first time. In fact, it was released in 1963 or 64, something like that, and as just acoustic with Simon and Garfunkel. It was their first single. They thought it would be a big hit, but it was a huge flop. Their whole first album was a flop. And then a DJ in Los Angeles hired musicians because he had a vision for this song, and just without telling them, recorded the drums, the bass, and the electric guitar, and then just released it on the radio. And so they're off doing their own thing. Garfunkel's teaching math, Paul Simon's doing something else, and all of a sudden their song's #1 on the radio. No one told them. And so then they got back together, recorded a whole nother album, and we're very grateful for this DJ who essentially launched their career after it had gone nowhere. So really sort of a fortuitous event, and sometimes asking forgiveness rather than permission helps more people than you would imagine. We know that very well here as Unitarian Universalists. And so today, a little bit about that story and some of the ways that song came about. We are going to look at some of the silent questions, because in fact, I really only got one question for this whole sermon. And I thought about, because it's such a good question, I could just do the whole thing on that one question. But there have been other questions, in fairness, that have been asked numerous times that, though they weren't submitted for this sermon, I did want to address. So we're going to do some of those. The first is of those is, when will the church be open again? This is a very simple question. It was never closed, friends. There has been chalice circles, there has been worship, there have been group meetings, there have been family chapels, there have been classes, there have been religious education happening. The church itself, in a sense, has lived in the hearts and the homes and the hearths of all of us for the last year and a half. Now, when will we have Sunday worship in the building on 2500 Poly Highway? That's a different question. We are going to be installing a new soundboard, and I promise we're not letting the tail wag the dog. It is, the original thought from safety perspective was Labor Day-ish, like around September. But we're going to be installing a new soundboard that will let us stream all the sound from all the microphones in the room into our online platform in the next few weeks. And then my hope is that in August, we will be experimenting some with transmitting live worship and music to send out to everyone, so that by September, we'll have that piece put together, and we'll be welcoming some people here back into the space and be doing both online and in-person worship around Labor Day. The powers that be will make that final call, but that is what we are shooting for now. So that's question to one. We got this question a little later, a little recently. Someone raised this question: is there any contradiction in an atheist calling him or herself a minister of God? So the simple answer here is, I don't think so. Some of this comes down to the nature of what is God, which is a very simple question. I'm so glad we answered this today. No, for some, the primary definition of God, if you look in a regular dictionary, just a regular one, not a theological one, is ultimate reality. That is, and so many people think of the word God as a placeholder for ultimate reality or universe or objective reality, or how you look at it. So I know that there are Episcopal priests who identify as atheists, yet still use the word God. And they use it as a term of really just, it's a shortened form of ultimate reality, which is just too many syllables. And so that is one answer. This might be a reference to my op-ed for a few weeks ago, where I said a few times, I'm a minister of God. I do believe myself to be a minister of God. I was ordained here in this church. My line of succession goes all the way back to the first priests who were ever ordained, in the Jewish religion and then in the Christian religion. And I feel like I draw that line myself from that heritage. And the other reason is that I was asked in that, first of all, I'm not an atheist. I wouldn't class myself as an atheist. So I'm not sure if this was really about me, but if that was a question about me in that op-ed, I hope this covered everything. But I will also just say this. I will go to any lengths I can to protect and support vulnerable populations with whatever tools are at my disposal. I am a mercenary for justice, especially among populations who may not have the ear of power that I have the privilege to have. So there may be times I say things that in public that sound a little different than you're used to, but I will never stop doing it. And I believe that's why you want me here. So that is the other thing I'll say about that. Question 3. Here's the humdinger. The one, now I have my phone here because I'm making sure I don't go long. Okay, this is in 3 parts. First, I grew up with a parent in the sky is falling, cup is half empty camp. I contend this way myself and sometimes worry I'll pass it on to my child. My parents' narrative was often founded in compassion, concern for abused women and children, and environmental degradation, yet there was no joy nor belief that they could take action to increase justice. I'm finding myself in that camp lately. Okay, that can be a little bit discouraging when we start to feel like we can't do things. So this reminds me of, first of all, I get this and I understand this. This reminds me of the story of my friend that I've told before, who got into my car once, and we were talking about God, which is just what I do with all my friends. And he came in and he said, sometimes I think God is just unpredictable, kind of maybe mean-spirited. I don't know what I'm going to get from the universe, from ultimate reality. And I just can't figure it out. And then other times I feel like God is kind and generous and just comforting and this like sense of real support in my life. And I was like, wow, lots of people have different views of how they're feeling. There's sort of a psychology of religion that would say kind of how you're feeling about the world is kind of how you feel about God. I didn't say that. I was just kind of talking about other stuff. And then another subject came up and he said, my mother drinks a little bit and I just never know what I'm going to end up walking into when I go see her, if she's going to be nice, if she's going to be mean, if she's going to remember what we talked about. I just never really know where I stand with her. And it's really hard to kind of know where I stand with her. But my father has always been there for me. He's just very kind and understanding and gentle and compassionate and always supports me when I need the support. And I just kind of let that sit there. These conversations were separated by moments. It wasn't even like a long period of time. And I said, you heard what you just said, right? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, you just described God and then you just described your parents. And then he was like, oh, and so one of the things that we say in religious education in what I call faith formation, which whenever I say faith formation, I get some kind of weird look around here. I just want to never get that look again. Faith formation means I'm forming what I believe about the world. And you do it for your whole life. And that's why I wanted to say a parent is the first, yes, religious educator that a child has, and the most important religious educator a child has. But what's happening more than religious education, because most parents aren't just sitting there with text or with history and talking about what they want to do, is they are showing their children how to respond to ultimate reality. They're showing children how to respond to objective reality, and just how they interact with the universe is carried on. It is. But the question is, what are we going to do about it? And so here's the second part of this question. It's in 3 parts. Part 2. I propose that wallowing in the sky is falling, cup is half empty camp is due to failing to know one's sphere of influence. A cognizance of one's sphere of influence enables one to mindfully and competently take action on the issues they can, which is energizing, while letting go of that which is beyond their control, thereby not getting swamped by the amazing number of unfortunate circumstances faced by so many lives on this planet. This doesn't mean pretending they don't exist or forgetting about them, but focusing energies on where one does have a sphere of influence. First of all, I love our members here that they're thinking about these things and that give me questions that are many paragraphs long so that we can really get deep into this. Now, here's my thing about sphere of influence. My main question, so yes, there is a piece to this, but whenever I hear sphere of influence, I start to wonder, what is that sphere like? Is it rigid? Can it expand? Is it permeable? What is the nature of what I think is my sphere of influence? Because in order for that idea to work, it's got to be permeable. It's got to be able to grow. You've got to be able to hop from your sphere to another, because what I think of more than a sphere of influence would be in traditional religious circles, we would call something a cloud of witnesses, which is all of the people who had attested or had been part of my faith tradition before I got there. So we all have a cloud of witness. And in Unitarian Universalism, those are some powerful witnesses of a literary, of a theological, of humanism, of atheism, of Judaism, of Christianity. Like, our cloud of witness is enormous. And so that's what comes with us. Now, the question is, I think of it more, can this cloud move over here, or a wind or a breeze that can blow from one place to another? The thing about wind and breeze is you never really know where it's going to end up. So maybe instead of a sphere of influence, I would be thinking more about how we as a community moves, almost like birds in the sky who seem to follow, or a school of fish who seem to know where they're going and always kind of get there. It kind of raises that, that question of where can we go together? Where will the wind take us? And I try to think of that more as what I do, especially on this island, because it's so easy to kind of hop into somebody else's sphere of influence to get a sense of what more you can do. So that is sort of how I think of that. I don't mean to just change your idea about a sphere of influence, but that might be another way to think about it. So the third part. In my assessment, you, meaning me, are acutely aware of the tragedies and misfortunes that can befall life on this planet. Yet you are remarkably alive, exuberant, and embracer of life. Would you attribute any of this to knowledge of your sphere of influence and mindfully acting within it, or to something else? So I think I've already gotten into the sphere of influence kind of question. And I think of my life more as this wind or a expansive cloud, if you will. It's not a great metaphor because a cloud can be kind of obscuring and have rain, but without the clouds, we never really appreciate the sun. So I see my life. So I think there is more to it than just that. I think I attribute the way I do have a somewhat positive outlook on the world. What you see here is really how I am. I think that for me, to be real, like, I've seen some suffering in my day, in my life, not just at the bedsides of others, but in my own life and in the lives of people that I love very much. Even just these past weeks, losing a friend to an untimely death. And one of the goals I have in life is to alleviate suffering. I remember I used to do meditation when I was in divinity school at the same time as I was studying childhood sex trafficking for a project in divinity school, helping out with a shelter in New Haven. And I found that my meditation, I couldn't meditate because I would just be crying. I would just be so hurt and torn by a world that can have the kind of suffering in it and just keep going on. I wanted to just cry and all this kind of stuff. And eventually in my meditation, I got past that and started, I remember once in my meditation, a voice came to me that just said, if you can help just one person with all that you've got, the years you've gotten training of legal skills, the debt you're taking on for divinity school, all of it is worth it if you help just one person. And then I had thought, even if I don't help one person, it's still worth it. And so for me, it came from a spiritual practice, a place of real darkness, of touching some of the void and finding an answer that is still worth it. It just is. That one life is enough. I mean, I read today an article in the UU World about the destruction of property versus one life. And a UU minister said, I would rather have 100 churches built and destroyed before I see one life destroyed. And that is the balance. And making the decision that says the sanctity and the sacredness of one life is what matters is part of the peace and the joy I know. So I guess that's sort of the answer to that third part. The joy comes alongside the suffering. And then there's a fourth question about the pledge drive. It's sort of a question of what happens if we don't raise enough money, or what's going on with the pledge drive. I just want to say something about money. I had another answer, but we're kind of running out of time. And I just want to say this. Money and spirituality are much closer related than people realize. If you want to really see a happy person, look at their savings account and their checking account, how they're spending their money, not just if they're buying too much ice cream or not just if they're, whatever it is. There's a balance to it. There's an elegance that comes because money is just a tool. So the question is, how am I using the tools I have in my life? Even today in our offertory, we're meeting someone who is using every bit of the money they have in a way that is most helping a population that they really care for. And one of the things about Unitarian Universalist giving is that so many of us are giving to so many other groups. We are a little different than other churches that see it as, I'm just giving all my money to the church. That's my one way of giving. I love that we support the ACLU. I love that members support public radio, that they support the library, that they do these things. And so it is a little bit of a different ask. So I want to say that about giving. And we are just so grateful for the ways that people do give. And I feel like we want to come to a place, however, as a church, I know this sounds kind of funny, but like, if you are someone who is not saving any money and doesn't have savings, doesn't have means, I don't want you to give to the church. I know that may sound strange. I would rather have a conversation with you about getting things in order for you and get you in touch with people who can help you. And I would love this church to understand that if someone isn't able to be essentially paying themselves in savings or in some way right now, that giving to the church is not what they should be doing right then. They should be taking action to help themselves. I remember the legacy of Jim Myers. When Jim Myers passed away, the number of people who said that they had been helped so much by his ministry of money and of saving and of understanding planning, it's probably the reason many of the people on this very service have the money to give back to the church. And I think bringing back that legacy of real stewardship, of stewarding the lives and the means of our folks is something we could be looking more carefully at. I know it sounds like it sounds a little strange, but I think the investment in that will actually pay dividends in not too far from now, years ahead. So if you're someone struggling with that question, I hope you'll come to me. I hope you'll come to someone so we can find the resources that you need, because giving is about gratitude. That is ultimately where it is. We give out of a sense of joy, out of a sense of belonging, out of a sense of wanting to see a world shaped in the vision of the community that we support. That is why we give. And so in that spirit, today is really the last Sunday of the official pledge drive. So I hope if you are someone who has not given yet, or who is struggling or has questions, will reach out to me or a member of the stewardship team to talk more about what that looks like for you. And so that our future can be blessed, not just with the means and the wonderful, wonderful funds and gifts that we are receiving, but with the spirit of true gratitude, understanding, and love that characterizes so much this community that all of us love. And may it ever be so. Blessed be, and amen.